Hey guys, Kara needs your help. Kara has been running consistently for a few weeks now, hoping that her crush will notice her once she loses extra weight. However, weeks has passed and her crush is still ignoring her. Hi, this is Jonah of Primal Thinker, and today you and I are going to apply first principles thinking in order to help Kara out. If you're new to first principles thinking, I made a video about it. I'll put the link in the description box below. Make sure you check it out before watching this video. And if you watch towards the end of this video, you will discover if Kara will keep on running for her crush. So let's get to work. Kara has a goal here. She wants to lose weight. And in order to be this thin, she has asked people around her what she can do. And the common suggestion is you should start running so you can shed some weight. And so Kara follows them and she consistently runs for a few weeks. But she didn't have significant results over those few weeks. And your goal now is to help Kara identify what she is doing wrong. Why is she not getting results? So if you are not familiar with first principles thinking yet, please refer to the first video that I made for you. And for now, we will be practicing this thinking method for Kara's problem. Step number 1, identify and define your current assumptions. So Kara, wanting to lose weight, has this assumption that the more she runs, the more fat burning will occur. And she also believes that when there's no pain, no gain. Okay, so this is the classic mentality of people who wants to get in shape but doesn't want to suffer. So people believe that you have to suffer first before you get results. And here we're going to see if that's really necessary or not. Okay, that's the assumption. Now we go to step number 2, break down the problem into its fundamental principles. So again, the assumption was more running means more fat burning. We can ask ourselves what fuels an activity, by the way, like running. And if you do your research, you will land on this answer saying that the body has 2 fuel sources. It's fat or glucose, more commonly known as the sugar. So that's one key principle here. Let's put that on the side and ask another question. Well, if we have 2 fuel sources, we're interested with the fat. How is fat burned? Fat requires oxygen to be burned. So fat along with oxygen, that means you can burn that fat. And that's another principle. We could make a table here for an easy reference as we go along and define the principles that we uncover each step. Okay, so on the left side, this is just saying that oxygen along with fat will result to fat burning. But how about glucose? How is it burned? Glucose can be burned both in the presence and absence of oxygen. So if we breathe enough air, you can still burn glucose, and if you don't breathe enough air, you can still burn glucose. So let's update our table for that principle. So it's going to look like this. For the glucose column, with oxygen, you can burn it. Without oxygen, you can still burn it. Okay, so far? But that will branch out to another question. You'll be naturally curious, how does the body decide which fuel to burn, which one to use? When is it fat? When is it sugar or glucose? Well, the body burns a combination of both fat and glucose. So you can picture it like this. It's always burning a combination of both, maybe 50% fat, 50% glucose, or 70% fat, 30% glucose. That's another key principle. Let's put that on the side. And you can continue asking about when does the body burn more fat than glucose? More fat is burned when there's enough oxygen, and glucose is scarce. So we know that fat is burned when oxygen is rich. And now we learn that fat will be burned if glucose supply is scarce. So that will mean more fat burning and less sugar burning. That's one key principle here. Again, let's summarize that into a table here for easy visualization. Again, more oxygen, less glucose results to more fat burning. How about glucose? When does the body burn more glucose than fat? Well, remember, glucose can be burned in either the presence or absence of oxygen, right? So when there's enough oxygen, more glucose is burned when supply is plenty. So that means after you eat, after a meal, your glucose levels go up. So that's breathing more air. Then after a meal, that means more sugar burning. Okay, so let's update our table here. So we added with oxygen, and then we have a plenty supply of glucose in our body. That means more glucose burning. Well, what about when there's not enough oxygen? Well, we know that glucose can be burned without enough oxygen, and fat cannot be burned without oxygen. So this is kind of obvious that if there's not enough air, more glucose is burned than fat. If you think about it, if you are kind of sprinting, you're running out of breath, your body's being subjected to stress and it needs instant energy. So it cannot wait for you to inhale more oxygen. And the body's mechanism is to look for the glucose to power your legs. Okay, so to finish up our table, this is what it will look like. It's automatic that less oxygen supply means more glucose is burned than fat. Okay, to summarize everything, we have defined these fundamental principles. Regarding fuel burning, we have two fuel sources. It's fat or glucose. And fat can only be burned in the presence of oxygen. So that is when we breathe air, we have enough supply. And on the other hand, glucose can be burned either with or without oxygen. Then to our right, the right table enumerates the conditions affecting which fuel to burn. So more fat is burned if we have more oxygen and less glucose. Okay, so now we have our fundamental principles. We can now proceed to the exciting part, which is creating new solutions from scratch. This is where we get creative with the principles that we just learned. So Kara's current solution is to run hard every afternoon after some snack. So after some donut in the afternoon, she runs very hard. Okay, so let's examine that solution and come up with our new solution based on the principles that we have defined in step number 2. So I put here the summary of the principle that we have defined earlier for guide. Now, look at this statement. Kara runs hard. Runs hard. So that means Kara is running like this every afternoon. Obviously, running like this means your Kara is running out of breath. So there's a low supply of oxygen. And if we refer to our principles in step number 2, this means that less fat burning is happening and more glucose burning, right? So what if we change that runs hard to, let's say, walks? Kara walks every afternoon after some snack. Like these happy penguins, right? Obviously, they are not huffing and puffing. They're not running out of breath. They are just enjoying their walk, breathing normally. And this entails that they have a high supply of oxygen. But if we examine the proposed solution, Kara walks every afternoon after some snack. Well, that means before walking or running, she's having some snack like a donut, right? And this means that by the time that Kara walks, her glucose levels are high. And if we look on the table of our principles on the left, this means that less fat is burned and more glucose is burned. Probably the glucose from that donut is burned. Okay, so what if we change that after a snack to before a meal? So Kara walks before having breakfast, let's say. So still we have a rich supply of oxygen. And since it's before a meal, that means her glucose levels are not that high. And this means that it encourages more fat burning and less glucose burning. So this could be one solution to Kara's problem. So instead of running hard after a snack, Kara could start walking before breakfast. And now this Kara understands that in order to achieve the thin Kara, she has to have an activity wherein there's a rich supply of oxygen and her glucose levels are low. And this means more fat burning for her. And this is when we can get creative. Now, Kara apparently hates running, but now she understands the concepts underlying fat loss. She can create her own solutions, right? So, for example, any activity wherein she is not huffing and puffing, that counts as an activity wherein there's a rich supply of oxygen. So that could be walking, hiking, walking the dog, or biking, or yoga. Anything that will not cause her to run out of breath. And also, to satisfy the low glucose levels, this means that it's any time that is spaced out before or after a meal. So that means before a snack or several hours after a meal or before a meal. Now, Kara is not just stuck in one route of like walking before a meal, but since she understands the key concept, she now has a choice and the freedom to do any of these activities whenever she wants, as long as it satisfies the concepts that we have defined in step number 2. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as I have enjoyed making it for you, and thank you so much for helping Kara out with her problem. Please comment down below what your biggest takeaway was, if there is, and also comment the next assumption you want us to question in the next video, and I'll do everything in my power to question your assumption. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's all about leveraging first principles thinking method to solve our real life problems. And make sure you subscribe for future videos like this one. So if you like this video regarding solving problems using first principles thinking, I would like to share with you about this book that I just released, and it's called What's Your Optimal Eating Pattern? It's about answering that question using this first principles thinking. So if you'd like a copy of this book, details are below in the description box. And if you'd like a copy, just go there, and you're up for a huge bonus if you'll go to the site, and you'll learn a lot of things there. It will help you create your own health strategies or solutions based on this first principles thinking method. And by that, you will not become an easy prey for fad diets that come along. So I'm excited. Please, if you'd like a copy of the book, link is in the description box below. And I will see you on the other side.